Sophia Grant had always felt like an outsider, though never in a way that diminished her confidence. From the moment she could read, she devoured books with a hunger that astonished even her parents. While other children played outside, Sophia would sit by the window for hours, losing herself in stories of far-off lands, ancient philosophers, and the brilliant minds of history. Her teachers noticed her quick grasp of concepts and her insatiable curiosity, often asking her to help classmates understand things that left them baffled. And yet, despite her academic success, Sophia's social life was complicated. Men, she found, were rarely ready for someone like her. She didn't just want someone who could hold a conversation, she wanted someone who could challenge her, question her ideas, and ignite her curiosity in ways no textbook ever could. But in her small town, that was a rarity. Most men were polite, some charming, many simple-minded, and all seemed daunted by her intellect. At parties, she would find herself in conversations that felt like a monologue, the other person nodding politely without truly engaging. And when a man tried to flirt, she saw immediately whether his admiration was for her mind, her wit, or merely her appearance, and often it was only the last. Sophia began to feel a quiet frustration. She would go on dates where the men's minds wandered the moment the conversation turned to anything beyond small talk. They were uncomfortable when she discussed the latest books she had read or the philosophical debates she enjoyed. It was as if intelligence intimidated them, or worse, made them uninterested. Nights would end with polite smiles, shallow goodbyes, and a gnawing loneliness that she could not quite shake. She began to wonder if the world even had room for a woman like her. Someone whose intellect demanded attention, whose heart sought depth, and whose soul refused to compromise for mediocrity. One late afternoon, as the winter sun dipped low and painted the streets in gold, a letter arrived at her doorstep. The handwriting was uneven, almost rustic, and the paper carried the faint scent of leather and earth. It was a letter from a man named Luke, a cowboy from a distant ranch, who had heard of Sophia's reputation as a scholar. He wrote humbly, almost nervously, requesting that she teach him about the world beyond his ranch, beyond the daily grind, beyond what he had ever known. Sophia laughed aloud at first. A cowboy, asking her for guidance. The idea seemed absurd, almost comical. How could a man who spent his days tending to cattle and repairing fences possibly hope to learn from someone so educated, so refined, so sophisticated? Yet, beneath the humor, curiosity stirred. Something in the way he wrote. The honesty, the humility, the unpretentious sincerity, made her pause. She agreed, more out of intrigue than expectation, and soon found herself traveling to his ranch. The landscape was rugged and untamed, with rolling hills, vast fields, and the distant silhouettes of horses grazing under the open sky. And there he was, Luke, with sun-kissed skin, a wide-brimmed hat, hands calloused from years of labor, and eyes that held a quiet, penetrating intelligence. He greeted her with a mixture of nervousness and respect, a handshake firm yet gentle. What struck her immediately was his humility. He admitted freely that he knew very little about the world beyond his ranch, and yet he seemed hungry to learn, not to impress, not to challenge, not to argue, but to genuinely understand. Sophia felt a flicker of something she had not felt in years, hope. Over the following weeks, their sessions began. At first, she expected them to be awkward, even tedious. She would explain concepts of history, literature, and philosophy, and he would nod, sometimes ask a question, and otherwise watch her with a patient attentiveness she found disarming. But slowly, Luke's curiosity revealed itself. His questions were thoughtful, probing, often reframing her own assumptions in ways she hadn't considered. One afternoon, as the sun blazed above the fields, he asked her why humans feared the unknown. His voice was calm, steady, but the question carried weight, and Sophia realized she had no simple answer. She spoke of evolution, society, and psychology, and he listened, never interrupting, yet occasionally offering his perspective, simple, grounded in life experience, yet unexpectedly profound. That was the moment she realized he wasn't just asking questions, he was learning, and in his learning, he was teaching her in return. Their lessons turned into discussions, discussions into debates, debates into laughter, and laughter into long walks across the ranch at sunset. Sophia, who had long believed she was too educated for every man, felt a shift. Luke challenged her, not by matching her education, but by meeting her mind with curiosity, sincerity, and humility. Nights under the stars became their secret classroom. They would lie on the porch, listening to the distant howl of coyotes, talking about the cosmos, human nature, and everything in between. Sophia realized that she had underestimated the kind of connection a man like Luke could offer. It wasn't in book knowledge alone, but in empathy, experience, and a willingness to grow. She felt a spark, an intellectual and emotional resonance that she had never experienced with anyone else. And slowly, very slowly, her walls began to crumble. Sophia began to think that perhaps being too educated for every man wasn't a flaw, perhaps it was simply a waiting period, a preparation, for someone who could see her not as an intimidating force but as a partner, an equal, a fellow explorer of life. And in Luke, she began to wonder, she might have found exactly that. Sophia had expected that teaching Luke would be a one-way street, that she would pass on knowledge and he would absorb it, but what she discovered over the following weeks was far richer, far more transformative. Luke's curiosity wasn't superficial, it ran deep. He asked questions about the nature of justice, about morality in human history, about love, loss, and the pursuit of happiness. Unlike other men she had known, who had nodded politely or become defensive when challenged, Luke listened. He processed, he reflected, and he returned her ideas with his own insights, shaped by a life lived close to the land, unfiltered by societal pretensions. One evening, after a long day of tending cattle, Sophia found herself explaining the concept of ethics in literature. Luke sat on the porch steps, boots dusty, hat in his hands, eyes fixed on hers. "Why do people do wrong, even when they know it's wrong?" he asked quietly, almost shyly, but with genuine interest. Sophia paused. She had heard the question in philosophy classes, in countless debates, but never spoken it aloud in such a raw, earnest context. "Because humans are complicated," she said finally. "We are shaped by circumstances, desires, fears. Sometimes we know the right path but follow the easier or more tempting one. Sometimes we fail because we lack courage." Luke nodded slowly, taking in her words. "And can we really learn to be better?" he asked. His question hung in the air, humble yet profound. Sophia smiled. "We can," she said, "if we are willing to question ourselves, to reflect, and to listen, not just to others, but to our own conscience." He considered this for a long moment. Then, almost shyly, he admitted, "That's what I want to do. I want to be better, in everything. But I don't know where to start." It struck Sophia how different he was from any man she had known. There was no ego, no need to impress, only honesty, humility, and a genuine hunger for growth. And that honesty created a space between them, a space where she felt safe to lower her own walls, to speak her fears and her dreams without judgment. Nights stretched into hours as they talked under the stars. The ranch was quiet, the only sounds the distant lowing of cows and the rustle of wind through the trees. Sophia found herself laughing more freely than she had in years, sharing stories from her past, her failures, and even her insecurities. Luke listened intently, never interrupting, never trivializing, and in his attentive gaze, she felt a warmth that words could barely capture. It wasn't long before Sophia realized that the lessons she intended to teach had evolved into something deeper. She was teaching him about the world, yes, but Luke was teaching her about patience, about resilience, about the beauty of simplicity, and the strength that came from facing life head-on. One afternoon, while they were repairing a broken fence together, Sophia remarked on how his hands, rough from work, were capable of such delicate understanding when handling the small, fragile components of life. He smiled, wiped sweat from his brow, and said, "I guess learning from you is helping me see things differently. Not just facts and theories, but why they matter." It was in moments like these that Sophia realized love often comes disguised as learning. It's never loud or obvious at first, it creeps in quietly, in shared laughter, in long silences, in understanding without needing to explain everything. And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life that didn't demand constant caution, a life where her intellect and his experience could coexist, where curiosity and compassion could intersect. Yet, the outside world loomed large. Small-town gossip whispered doubts, and Sophia's own fears reminded her that differences in background, lifestyle, and education could become walls instead of bridges. But Luke, in his gentle way, met every doubt with patience. One evening, under a sky splashed with stars, he took her hand in his, rough, strong, and reassuring, and said, "I don't care about how much you know or how smart you are. I care about who you make me want to be." Teach me more, not just about books, but about life. And I'll show you parts of me that no one else can. That simple, earnest declaration dismantled years of skepticism in Sophia's heart. In that moment, she understood that the right person doesn't need to match you in education, wealth, or experience. They need to meet you with curiosity, respect, and a willingness to grow together. As days turned into weeks, their bond deepened. Conversations became debates, debates became playful challenges, and challenges became laughter-filled adventures across the ranch. Luke learned quickly, not just because he was intelligent, but because he wanted to understand, and because Sophia's guidance was paired with encouragement rather than judgment. Sophia, in turn, began to see the world through his eyes. The beauty of a sunrise over a field, the rhythm of work that connects a person to the earth, the satisfaction of seeing results of effort with one's own hands. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, love took root. It wasn't a sudden spark, it was a steady, deepening realization that she had found someone who could walk beside her in every sense. Someone who could challenge her mind without threat, share his world without expectation, and love her not for appearances or achievements, but for the essence of who she was. Sophia had spent so long believing she was too educated for every man. Now, with Luke, she discovered that perhaps she had simply been waiting for the right one, the man willing to learn, to grow, and to meet her fully. For viewers following this journey, Sophia's story is a reminder that life's most meaningful connections often appear when we least expect them, and in forms we might initially underestimate. It teaches us that true love is not about perfection, but curiosity, growth, and mutual respect. So if you've been inspired by Sophia and Luke, hit subscribe and follow the channel, because their journey is just beginning, and there's so much more to see when intelligence, heart, and courage collide in unexpected ways.